And Mr. Turner, FBR. And Mr. Nicholas Aguzin, Chairman and CEO, Asia Pacific, JP Morgan Chase. And Mr. Zhang Yichen, Chairman and CEO, Citi Capital. And Mr. Zhu Ning from Shanghai Advanced Institute of Finance. These are all the experts from academic and management and regulators of Chinese finance. I want to brief the audience. You can raise your questions online through sina.com, or you can raise questions on site. And there are two marks. Our topics. One is Davos. One is Chinese finance prospect. Please use hash key on your topic. And I will help you to raise the question through my iPad. Why do we say rebooting China's finance? On the one hand, China's financial system is already very big, over 9 billion RMB. And we need to change. We cannot rely on the traditional financial system, and we are seriously challenged. Maybe the barbarians think the key lies in cross-border banks, but actually, internet finance is the key. So my first question to the panelists, to release the burden, to open up, to innovate. And how can the Chinese finance react to this? Mr. Liu, please. Over the past 10 years, Chinese financial system has made wonderful progress because the Chinese government attached great importance to the financial system, and we have come a long way. For example, we ended the monopoly of the state-owned commercial banks. We will not turn to the mayors or the financial governors. And we're allowed to issue the subprime mortgage on the market to make up for the Tier 1 and Tier 2 capital. These are the measures to help the market. And also, we strengthened our efforts to fend off the risks. The capital adequacy ratio reached above the Basel requirement. And also, the total amount of capital reached almost 10 trillion RMB, and provision is over 3 trillion RMB. So we have abundant provision to guard against risks. And we also have over 10 trillion US dollars of foreign exchange reserve. And people are very sensitive toward risks. For example, banking associations, the State Council, and the Ministry of Finance, people pay a lot of attention to shadow banking and the internet finance. We are very sensitive. And people conduct early discussions and early moves. Another progress is we're in the best stage for international cooperation. For example, we joined FSB, and we have activities in these frameworks, and we also have cooperation with IMF and World Bank. So these are the progress. But for the challenges, I think there are the following aspects which we are considering. One is to separate, before we emphasize that the government should be separate from business, and now the fiscal system should be separated from the banking system. And the local government and local banks should be in charge of their own profit and loss. And they should consider their own capital flow and issue debt to the market. If the local government financing vehicles continue to strengthen, it will add to the debt of the banks and it will cause risk. So our budget law, new budget law, is under drafting, and we will have a better or brighter policy toward local finance, and will continue to regulate the capital market. Without a strong capital market, especially equity market, debt market, we cannot help or boost the economy in a new time. We know some VC and PE. These two things are very similar. But for biofund, we need to find something to conduct MA and to digest the overcapacity of the SOEs. However, we fall short of our expectations in this regard. And also, the regulations toward getting listed or IPO is changing. I think Hong Kong-Shanghai exchange has been making progress. Also, the banks need to focus, and they need to conduct in-depth business. It has to do with their strategic transformation. They should focus on SMBs. These are the source of innovation and also source of improving productivity. However, taxations and employment, these are fundamentals. Also, China's trade import is about $2 trillion and another $2 trillion of export, accounting for almost 1/3 of the world's total. So behind China is still China. No other country in the world can substitute China in international trade. So trade finance also need to reform. And Intro-Asia trade finance and trade settlement has great potential. Thirdly, the fixed asset investment is very large in China. However, project financing numbered less. So how can we connect banks and project sponsors and project entities? And to have a clear job assignment or division between them is something we have to consider. And also, finance need to serve the world. We need to have some taxation and fiscal support to help digest the overcapacity so that MA can become easier. Be it international or domestic companies, we can allow some loss for these companies. We need to allow some NPLs for these companies for transformation. If we can have a better grasp of the above-mentioned four aspects, Chinese banking system has great hope. But of course, we still need to try to build the corporate governance and the cultural and the enterprise culture development. We have a lot of talents. If we have better institutions, we will have better vitality and retain these talents. we will not serve our own interests, we can also serve our customers' interest. And also for regulation, we need to reform the regulation system. Before we had separate regulation, but now there are a lot of things mixed up. So the consistency in interpretation of the regulation and also the predictability of the outcome of irregularities should be paid attention to. Otherwise, we cannot create an enabling environment for the business community. It's not so difficult to reboot Chinese finance. And China's, for example, the insurance industry is faced with greater opportunities because of the aging population and the fewer young children. And to caring for the young and the old has already created a sunrise industry, and we need to transform the mechanisms and institutions. And every festival, a lot of people swarm to Hong Kong to buy insurance. So if our domestic market can do a better job, then China's finance will enjoy a brighter future. Thank you, Mr. Liu. You have given a very insightful view. I will give floor to Lord Turner now.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be talking here this afternoon. Actually, a very particular pleasure to be on the same platform as Liu Mingkang. MK and I worked very closely together on the FSB, which you mentioned, in the issues to do with the redesign of the global financial system after the financial crisis. And from that, I was very aware, from talking to MK and others about the Chairman Liu and others, the very, very significant progress that has been made, which Chairman Liu just talked about. But I, like him, would like to focus on the challenges, and I want to suggest 3 challenges for the financial system which relate to what needs to happen in the Chinese real economy, and then a word on how difficult those are, and a final word about how not to be diverted by unimportant objectives. The 3 challenges are: first, the supply of credit to SMEs. If you look at what the typical SME in China is paying to the formal banking system for credit, it would appear to be on average something like 20%, versus major corporates or SOEs able to borrow at 6 or 7%. This difference of 13%, we always see this difference across the world, but this is a higher difference than in most other countries. And there are also many SMEs, I think we well know, which find it difficult to find credit in pure quantity terms and are relying on either intercompany credit or high-priced informal networks of credit. And that reflects some well-known skews within the banking system of the state-owned banks having a natural tendency to lend money to the state-owned enterprises. They're familiar with them, they feel close to them. And the key point is that if China is really going to move to a decisive role for the market and the development of a service sector and the development of more of a private sector, a better supply of credit, which is less skewed towards the largest companies and the SOEs, I think is important. The second challenge, which again starts from a real economy challenge, is the rebalancing of the economy away from a very high investment focus, current investment pace 50% of GDP, which is, outside all the historic models of other development processes, towards more consumption. And within that, the liberalization of deposit interest rates could play a useful role. There are a number of reasons why liberalizing deposit interest, removing the cap on deposit interest, may be relevant both to rebalancing and to financial stability. Lower deposit rates represent essentially a subsidy flow from households to business. Essentially, it means that some categories of business are getting underpriced credit, which is likely to result in a misallocation of capital to capital investment projects which are at the margin are wasted. And I think we all know that alongside the much important and very good capital investment in China, there is also a proportion, and probably now a significant proportion, which is somewhat wasted. So underpricing of credit is a problem, but it is also true that that subsidy essentially takes income away from consumers and gives it to business, and that gets in the way of the expansion of consumption, which is an important development within the Chinese economy. It also has, I think, a worrisome financial stability development, because it means that if you don't totally control the system, you get things which look like deposits and sound like deposits, but they manage to be not called deposits. They manage to get called wealth management products, or they manage to get called money balances at Alipay, both of which are different mechanisms of sending money through the system, either direct to lending or in the form of a wholesale finance to the banking industry. Banks no longer having their own deposits, but getting the money off Alipay, which effectively has deposits. And we know from the experience of the US that you have to watch that very carefully. That if you get the development of money market funds, which again, actually, their origins in the States, in the US, is precisely the same origins as some of these things in China. It is the fact that up until the early 80s, America had a regulation Q, it was called, a deposit interest cap, which generated the development of the money market funds, which we thought were fine until 2008, when we realized that wholesale money into the banking system can be very flighty money. It can be subject to runs. So having a deposit interest cap, which encourages a set of regulatory arbitrages, can itself be a form of risk. The final third thing I would mention as a challenge for the whole Chinese economy, but also for the financial system, is the creation of real hard budget disciplines in both the real economy and the financial system. You really can't have a system which has a decisive role for the market unless there is a possibility of default, a possibility of bankruptcy, a possibility of a failure. That needs rules to make sure that happens in a non-disruptive fashion, but a market system has to be disciplined by the possibility of failure. And I think what's happened in the 8 months of this year, for us looking outside at the Chinese financial system, is an interesting backwards and forwards as to whether the authorities really are willing to go towards that. There was a lot of excitement back in January about a wealth management product, which I think I remember was to a coal company in Shaanxi, which looked as if it would be a major default, and then at the end of the day, it was a tiny default, a relatively small haircut, a process of looking after the problems. And I think throughout the year there's been discussion as to whether loans are being moved to the asset management companies, but still funded by the banks in a way that avoid the problem of default. But at some level, the Chinese authorities, both in the financial system and the real economy, will have to allow there to be loans that go bad, because without that, again, one is potentially driving a misallocation of capital. And the longer that one doesn't seize that problem, the longer the danger that more and more credit is simply rolled over, and the credit to GDP just gets to a higher and higher level, up already over the last 5 years from 130% of GDP to 250%. So those are three major challenges. But I think we also need to recognize that they're very difficult challenges, and you can't solve these challenges by simply saying, I'll just have a free market and everything will be fine. Because we know from our economies that a completely free market in credit also has biases within it. You leave the allocation of credit just entirely to the free market without macroprudential tools, without a worry about it, and they will go off, the banks will go off and they'll lend lots of money against real estate and not enough money to SMEs. I mean, in the EU and the UK, we are now worried about whether our financial systems lend enough money to SMEs. And both the Bank of England and the ECB actually have in place special lending facilities deliberately designed to try and get through funding to SMEs and not to mortgage markets. So we have not found that completely free markets, magically solve all these problems. And there are certainly huge difficulties of transition, because once you've already got a very large stock of debt in the economy, 250% of GDP, imposing hard budget disciplines, you have to get the pace of that right, because if you simply chuck them in immediately and suddenly say we're going to have a whole load of defaults, and if you don't have resolution systems for banks and you don't get the pace right, you can shock the economy in a way which depresses it significantly. So these are very difficult challenges. And I think the crucial thing is to recognize how both very important and difficult they are. And that is my final thought I would make, that in attacking those, I would be careful of one of the things in the subtitle of our session today. We have the phrase rebooting Chinese finance. I'm perfectly happy with that. But we have a subtitle which says what models and reforms will boost China's financial sector. I would be careful of the idea of boost, because it implies that you want a bigger financial sector as an aim in itself. The crucial thing is to have a financial sector which is helping you solve real economy problems. So I would prefer the title to say, will help reform China's financial sector rather than simply boost it.
Thank you, Lord Turner. Suggestion noted. We will do better next time. Thank you. So our two senior regulators in our panel have already made their points. Now it's turn for our practitioners. Nick first.
Sure, thank you very much. And I'm going to build up on what was mentioned by Lord Turner and also by Chairman Liu. And I read that you were at Chase at some point.
I was at Chase.
Okay, so another banker.
Right.
Good, great.
Yeah, when I was 22, I was at Chase.
So I'd like to build on the phrase of the markets playing a decisive role on the allocation of resources. And obviously, it's very important in an economy, as Lord Turner said, that is investing around 50% of GDP, which is, just a gigantic number. And part of it is a cultural result of savings also being pretty high. So clearly, this is particularly important, and a lot of attention around this has been paid lately. And when we discuss the issue, what does it mean? It means that we need to be able to have the right risk and return framework. So Lord Turner said that he was quite encouraged at the beginning of the year when he saw that there's possibly some change around some defaults, and while some people around the world looked at that as a negative thing, many other players, especially in the financial industry, we saw it as something actually quite positive, in the sense that, okay, this means that the market will actually be in a position to price risk. Today, pricing risk in China is fairly difficult. So pricing risk will certainly play a significant role in allocating resources in the most efficient ways. And it's becoming more and more important as we go to a service and consumption-driven economy. So there are, in my view, three things that are important to be able to have a functioning market where risk is priced appropriately. First of all, we need competition. To have competition, we need a level playing field. We need to make sure that we have new players that are able to participate in the market, and part of the topic is also all the topic around internet and the role that they could play, and there are things in favor, things against, how do we regulate them that are quite important. There's also certain restrictions on foreign players in terms of having a significant participation in local financial institutions or securities companies. That also plays a very important role. I'll just give the example of JP Morgan. We have 5 joint ventures, and while we feel pretty comfortable with the partners that we have in our joint ventures, if we were to choose a way of investing and operating in any country around the world, we wouldn't choose to have 5 different partners depending on where you go, and to build our presence and to have our best people and our best resources dedicated in that manner. So trying to really allow for greater participation and flexibility by foreign investors participating in the local financial sector, we think could be constructive in terms of building that competition and improved environment. The second thing that we need is transparency. And when we talk about transparency, I'm not talking about the shadow part of shadow banking, but it does touch into certain aspects of that. Because when you look at the discussions around trust companies, it is not clear exactly where the risk lies, who is absorbing the risk. And while it may be clear from reading resolutions, bylaws, who is on paper assuming the risk, it's not clear if it's the trust companies, the financial institutions, or the investors in the end that will bear the cost of price or risk being allocated and distributed in the right way. So we need very clear rules of the game to be able to have an evolving and fruitful financial system. And the third one is effective regulation and supervision. And I think there are great components and great progress that has been done in this area. For the most part, the Chinese financial system is a very solid system, well-regulated system, well-supervised system. And this will ensure that the first 2 points that are mentioned are sustainable in the long term: transparency and competitiveness. It'll also protect against systemic risks, which is something very important. And we have seen the effects of other markets when certain players, and it doesn't need to be financial institutions. It could come from other sectors. It could come from insurance sectors. It could come from other players, financial players, internet companies, etc. So it's important to have a holistic view of the financial system and what the potential impact is in terms of the overall performance of a country. So those are some of the areas that I think are important in terms of creating a very solid and sustainable financial sector. Some other areas where I think there could be important improvements and developments are creating a safety net for the system, and that could vary. Some short-term initiatives is the creation of deposit insurance. Others that are more important for the long term are, for example, developments around encouragement of insurance companies, as Chairman Liu mentioned, pension system. Those could potentially fix some of the issues around availability of long-term capital, because insurance companies and pension funds, they would like to have long-term investments. So that may help also in the development of project financing and other areas that are very necessary for the development of infrastructure. The other one, development of the capital markets. And this one is also important in terms of developing long-term financing alternative, sustainable access to companies that are investing in China. So that is one that I think there's quite a bit of progress. The Shanghai Hong Kong Stock Connect, I think it's a great initiative that will have significant impact, and it's in the right direction. And the last one is we need to continue fostering innovation. And as I said before, the additional competition in the market, whether it's by foreign investors, by newcomers, as long as it's a level playing field, is definitely going to play a substantial role in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. 奕晨你。
刚才
Just now, the previous speaker have covered a lot of aspects from the macro levels. I totally agree. I want to be more specific relating to my daily work. First, in the financial system, the business I'm in, VC and PE, what role should they play? Yesterday, Premier Li Keqiang, in his keynote speech at the opening plenary, he said that we should encourage startups. I think this is a very good call. Chinese people are very innovative. In this way, we can display our innovative capability, and that's the fundamental to boost the national economy. But to start a business, where does the money come from? We still need a very developed VC and PE sector to support. The capital managed by this business, for example, in the United States, it's almost 5% of its GDP, but in China, it's almost 1% of the GDP. So this sector in China still has great potential to grow. Also, in VC and PE sector, we provide funds in terms of equity. The previous speakers mentioned that from a leverage point of view, the leverage ratio of Chinese economy is very high. Lord Turner mentioned that it's almost 250% of its GDP. So actually, what we need is to deleverage. For startups, what they need is equity investment. You cannot expect banks to give direct credit to the startups. So that's my first point. Second, has something to do with the shadow banking system. If you want to track the money flow of a shadow banking system, it's usually to the local government and also property companies. For real estate companies, a lot of money still goes to the local government. To address this issue, we see a lot of debt of the local government. If we combine the guarantee part, it's almost 18 trillion RMB. It sounds a large number, but when I joined the Winter Davos, I break it down. It's usually 2-year term for the 18 trillion. If we can refinance every 2 years, it will have great pressure on the banking system. But for the same amount of debt, if you build a full-fledged, highly efficient debt market, especially municipal bond market, every year the part of refinance will go down substantially, and it will ease pressure for the banking system. So that's what I want to add to Mr. Liu's point. We have worked for many years to build diversified layers of capital market, but the debt market so far hasn't been developed very well. And also for internet companies. Mr. Liu said the regulators has very high tolerance toward internet companies. The same thing that has been done by Ali, by Tencent, by Baidu. The US regulators won't be so tolerant as the Chinese regulators. So I think the Chinese government has made great efforts here. They want to encourage Chinese financial innovation. They wanted to go one step further. Because of the legacy problem, the Chinese financial system lagged behind. So internet sector is our opportunity. Maybe we can go even beyond the United States. It's like the same issue on e-commerce. Since the modern commerce in United States is already very developed, so e-commerce can only be a dessert. It cannot be a main course. However, in China, maybe e-commerce players can be the main dish. And then come back to PEVC sector. It's also an important part of the comprehensive and full-fledged multi-layer financial system. The banks holds the majority of the assets. It accounts for 70 or 80% of the total financial system assets. Before we build a full-fledged and multi-layer financial system, what we lack is a long-term fund. For example, how do we really establish the enterprise annuity system so that this part of fund can enter the investment sector? PVC sector in the United States, at the beginning, was only the tool for some rich families. It's not a real sector or a real industry. But after the 1970s, because ERISA law was passed by the United States, the pension fund can be allowed to invest in PE and VC. So PE and VC sector really developed. And it also helped the stock market and helped the financial management business as well as the insurance. It can provide stable funding to these industries. Maybe with the long-term funding stability, our Chinese stock market won't be so short-sighted. That's my point. Mr. Zhu, I think the previous speakers have shared wonderful ideas. So to reboot Chinese finance after the 20 or 30 years of development, Chinese financial system are faced with 4 turning points. First is from quantitative to qualitative transformation. We mentioned our banking system, the capitalization of the stock market, and the scale of the trust product. They all ranked on top of the world. And with the scale expansion, we pay more attention to, for example, with the economic restructuring and economic slowdown, we pay more attention to risks. So before, we want fast and good sound development of financial system, but now we focus more on risk. And thirdly, financial service as a high-end service sector, it should be part of the real economy. However, after 2007 and 2008, after the financial crisis, the real economy and the financial sector is put on the confronting side instead of helping each other. So it's not only in China, but the whole world. For the financial system, for the banking system, people are not very friendly. We can sense that. It's a change in China. And finally, the leverage and risk of the financial system are transferring from private sector to the public sector. Why do we say that? Because the SOE's leverage ratio and the local government financing vehicles leveraging ratio are within control, but they are increasing. It shows that the whole financial system need to rebalance and reform. But how to reform? I have three main points to pay attention. First is the interest rate marketization. I think in this process, the small amount deposit interest rate hasn't been deregulated yet. That's the most important part. In the U.S., it also took 10 years for it to be deregulated. And also, in the past 2 years, we see a lot of internet product and the wealth management product and trust product. And these are all tools to push forward the marketization of the interest rate market. If we can use such tools, and there will be a lot of asymmetry product, I think we might as well just be direct to establish the deposit assurance system and accelerate the marketization of the small amount deposit, because the interest rate is an important factor. It reflects the whole economy and its allocation of time and risk. In past 20 years, we even need a coupon to buy some pork or some other machines. So for different borrowers, for different people with different credit abilities, it has a different attitude. So when can we let market play the full role so that we can have a fair and transparent pricing of the interest rate? I think this will help a lot for China's financial reform. The State Council has issued a lot of policies. How can the finance better serve the economy? But under the current interest rate system, maybe the private capital won't want to set up banks. And also, second, you have mentioned the multi-layer capital market. I agree with Mr. Zhang and Mr. Liu. I think the core from a business point of view, the development of that market is the most important. It's one stone to kill many birds. Be it enterprise or local financing vehicles, they should disclose their financial information more. And it can also help the corporate governance in China. Also, that market development can help the government through municipal bond market and through direct financing to meet the direct investors and give a proper rate of the risks. And also, with the debt market development, we can help with the exit system of the stock market.
Well, number 5, of course, we can consider the possibility of a good debt market, and then the investors will not have to waste their money in the low-yielding stock market and also the risky real estate industry, and also can help dilute the bubble in the property markets, and also can help with the orderly development of the capital markets overall. So I think that debt market is really a key to the development of capital markets. Now, the Hong Kong and Shanghai exchange link is really a good innovation. Now, the Hong Kong is still a preferred choice for IPOs of the Chinese companies. However, in terms of diversity of the currency and the listing places is still lacking for China. Multi-currency and multi-geographical locations are not there yet. Well, we still have to leave some time. Well, sorry about that. Just last point. The third point I wanted to make is the implicit guarantee for the exit market. Exit strategy, be it the stock market or the banking sector and wealth management products, there's a lot of protection from the government. So how can we encourage the government to exit the so-called implicit guarantee? That's very important. Thank you so much. Now, we all talked about the internet-based finance, and we also received a question from the outside of this venue. Now, Mr. Zhang Yichen talked about the policy being so tolerant of the internet-based finance in terms of its current development, and in terms of identification of risk before they want to institute a proper policy. Now, because of the impact from the internet-based finance, we think this is a very important issue. Now, Chairman Liu Mingkang also made a speech recently about the development of the internet-based finance and the development of the consumer finance. Now, about internet-based finance, I think it really has a great potential toward robust development, but it has to have a good strategy and a vision and value system. Well, internet is well equipped with the data and interface based on internet and maybe cloud computing if necessary. Now, three advantages that it has. It's zero distance with the customers and also low cost. So everybody can be the provider and the consumer of the credit, and also the democratic way of participation that can really encourage innovation. Now, these 3 points are the natural strength or advantages of the internet-based finance. Now, we need to keep those advantages, but they need to respect some pattern or discipline. It needs to be small and needs to be widespread in terms of a risk distribution. And thirdly, it needs to be simple. So these 3 points are very important for its viable development, and to keep the cost low and risk low, and also proper regulation is needed. It needs to be in a differentiated way in terms of regulation. Otherwise, it can be problematic. Now, internet-based finance is still young, but is rapidly developing. Over 1,000 such companies, over 200 crowdfunding, and cash pool, and also the underground refinancing. For example, it's actually a fraud. They would get the money in the morning, and they take the money away and disappear in the afternoon. Well, I think this is only natural in the starting stage of any industry. Well, this is sort of like a warm-up period in front of the official competition in games. But after the warm-up, you need the rules before the game starts. You cannot make rules as the game is going on, or you only get the rules or set the rules after the games. That will be chaotic. So it's time now to encourage the industry's development with differentiated rules for regulation. Now, Mr. Zhang, if China's financial system to become as efficient as the U.S. or the European ones, the impact from internet-based finance would not be that disruptive. Now, because of that, the lack of sophistication in the financial system, the internet-based finance actually can play a bigger role than it should be. So what are your thinking in your investment strategy? Well, honestly, we are actually not making an investment investment strategies toward the internet-based finance sector, because just like Chairman Liu said, the rules are not there yet. We are a big conglomerate, under the name CITIC. So if we make an investment, but somebody is a fraudulent case, and that would be risky for us, be it Alibaba or Tencent, we actually we were in talks in terms of possible cooperation, but no tangible project really pans out. Well, probably because you're aiming too high. Your capital investment is always aiming the bigger amount. Well, we actually we were looking at different companies, but there were no good ones. Well, Professor Zhu, both these two speakers talked more about risks. What about you? I think in addition to regulation, there's also risks with corporate governance. Well, behind risks, this sector is actually promoting the further development of the financial system. And also, it does really bring 15 to 30% of yield to the investors where there are no other good options for investment. So we need to also look at the benefits that it has brought, but also we need to balance between the risks and returns. Now we open the floor for questions. Who has a question? Please raise your hand, and also identify yourself, and also state which speaker you direct your question to. Now in the corner there. Please stand up.
From D.E. Shaw. A quick question for Chairman Liu. You mentioned a lot about the reforms in your remarks. I'm kind of curious. Reforms take time, right? So in the interim period, while reforms are being enacted, when there is deleveraging, when there is change happening, what happens to growth? What happens to the economy? And how do you mitigate these impacts? Thank you.
Could you? Sorry, I didn't catch the last part of your question.
What is the impact on growth in the economy, and how do you mitigate or prevent some of these impacts?
Right.
Thank you.
Well, in terms of the current growth of the economy, it has moderated a little bit. It's really only natural because China's economic growth, well, it's actually different. Well, right now, the period is different from the 1997 crisis. We are actually more open. The external demand has weakened, and internally, we have the demand to restructure the economies and also to absorb the excess capacity, because there are a lot of industries that have excess production capacity. So that's why the leadership is very decisive about reducing the excess production. And also there's the appeal for reduction of environmental pollution. And also there is the further reform of the SOEs. I think that's good. In the long term, it's good for the financial system, but in the short term, in the minute term, there will be some rise in terms of the bad debts. Some people have asked me, we see the increase in the NPL. Well, I said it's only natural. Relatively speaking, it was pretty low, and it was in 2010, it was a double-digit growth in terms of the economy. And now 7.5% and reduced by 30%. So it will have some impact on the banking system. But like I said, we have enough reserves for bad debt, 3 trillion. We have good the CAR, the capital adequacy ratio, and also the permission to issue preferred stock and sub-debt. So this is enough to absorb the adjustments of the real estate bubble and also the financing for the energy efficiency and the environmental pollution reduction. But we should not be complacent. Two biggest enemy, complacency is one of them, one of the two. That's definitely a big no-no. So if we look at the long term, we need to accelerate the reform. So deepening of the reform and acceleration of the reform are critical. So I do agree with the leadership in terms of the direction of the reform before we can embrace a bright future. And the second enemy would be panic. 200%, over 200% of a debt ratio, and also the doubling of the NPL from 0.8% to over 1%. Well, there's no need for panic here. Chinese have a good habit of a good sense of direction, and also we want to take our time. We want to take our steps gradually. So these are two kind of tendencies of the Chinese people. We should not just panic. I think we still have time because we have the scale of the market. To answer your question, definitely there will be some impact, negative impact on the economy, and hence stress and pressure, and that we actually can generate innovation and motivation for further reform. We can take a final question in the middle, in the suit, please.
Itaú, question for Gucho. Knowing that you are originally from Argentina, and given what's happening with the sovereign debt situation in Argentina, is there any lesson that China can draw from your country originally?
Well, it's very different. The one thing that I would say, and I did work for 20 years covering Latin America, so I've been for the last 2 years in Asia. And China and Asia in general have a unique opportunity to actually determine its own future. The amount of savings and investment is something that differentiates China from Latin America. Both regions have tremendous potential, are emerging economies, relatively low debt to GDP, high level of reserves. Not so much Argentina, but Brazil, which is probably your country or your bank's country, I mean, is in that situation. But they have this reliance on external investment that in the case of China is not there. China can determine its own future. So when I see China taking steps slowly but surely, I am very encouraged. I'm very optimistic. And if we really allow the market to have a decisive role on determining the allocation of resources, this will be a great story in not so long.
Thank you, Nick. 我们今天因为时间关系。
Now, for the interest of time, we'll wrap up our discussions. Let's give a round of warm applause to our panelists here. Thank you. I'll see you next year.